The evening sky, above the grand estate, seemed to stretch on forever, as if mocking her smallness in the world. Clara, her hands rough from years of hard labor, stood there, gazing up at the towering mansion. Despite her unkempt hair and worn dress, she held herself with a dignity that most never noticed. The cold wind bit at her skin, but she ignored it, focusing on the figure that stood at the balcony above. Lord Edward, the arrogant heir to the estate, leaned over the railing, his eyes cold and indifferent as they met hers. He smirked, the same smirk he wore every time he saw her. An underdog, someone far below his status. He barely acknowledged her existence, except when he needed someone to ridicule. Clara gritted her teeth, clenching her fists. She knew she had no right to feel this way. After all, she was nothing but a servant in his eyes. Yet, something about his cruel gaze stung more than it should. She could feel the weight of his superiority bearing down on her, but she would never bow. Not now, not ever. Clara continued her walk deeper into the woods, her mind racing. The tension from her encounter with Lord Edward lingered in her thoughts. Why did he look at her like that? What was it about her presence that seemed to irritate him so? She knew he saw her as nothing but a servant, someone beneath his notice. But Clara was no fool. She had overheard the whispers from the other workers in the estate, murmurs about a secret tied to her bloodline, something that could change everything. But what was it? She had never seen any sign of the wealth the workers spoke of, nor did she ever expect it to come her way. Yet deep down she felt something stir within her. It was as though fate had drawn her to this moment. A secret was waiting to be uncovered, and she would find it, no matter the cost. As Clara ventured deeper, the trees seemed to close in around her. She came upon an ancient stone archway, weathered by time, standing tall like a forgotten guardian. She could sense that something extraordinary lay beyond it. She hesitated. Her instincts told her to turn back, but her feet continued forward, drawn by the allure of the unknown. The archway was carved with intricate symbols, ones she had never seen before, but they felt oddly familiar. Her hand brushed against the stones, and a strange warmth surged through her. The sensation startled her, but she didn't pull away. It was as though the stones themselves recognized her touch. In that moment she knew this was no ordinary place. She was standing on the precipice of a discovery that would change her life forever. Clara's fingers traced the strange symbols on the archway, feeling the warmth that seemed to pulse from the stones. As if answering her touch, the archway began to hum softly, the symbols glowing faintly in the dimming light. A surge of energy coursed through her, and she stepped back, startled. Her heart raced as the realization dawned on her. The power hidden in this place was no accident. She was meant to be here. But why? The woods, once quiet and peaceful, now felt alive with unseen forces. Clara glanced around, suddenly aware of the weight of the moment. It wasn't just the estate that held secrets. This place too was part of something larger than her. She felt it in her bones, the deep pull of destiny drawing her forward. The questions swirled in her mind. But one thing was certain. Her life was about to change forever. The home of the archway gradually faded, leaving Clara in the stillness of the woods. Her breath was shallow, her mind racing. What had just happened? She stepped forward, past the arch, into the unknown. The forest ahead felt more alive now, the air thick with the scent of earth and ancient trees. As she moved deeper into the woods, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. The weight of someone's gaze pressed upon her, but when she turned, no one was there. Her instincts screamed at her to leave, to turn back to the safety of the estate. But the pull of whatever lay ahead was stronger than fear. She continued walking, her steps determined, even as the darkness of the forest seemed to grow more intense around her. The silence, heavy and oppressive, swallowed her every movement. But Clara had always been resilient, and if this was the path to her true self, then nothing would stop her from walking it. Clara had spent the night in the woods, unable to sleep, haunted by the strange encounter at the archway. The symbols in her mind burned with an intensity she couldn't understand. The morning sun broke through the trees, but it did little to ease the unease in her chest. When she finally returned to the estate, she was greeted with Lord Edward's cold smile, his arrogance as thick as ever. "Back from your walk, Clara?" he mocked. "Did you find what you were looking for in the trees?" His voice was sharp, his eyes filled with disdain. Clara didn't answer, feeling a knot tighten in her stomach. She had hoped the strange feeling from the archway would fade, but it only grew stronger. There was something pulling her to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. She had to confront whatever power lay dormant inside her. Later that day, Clara found herself alone in the kitchen, scraping vegetables for the evening meal. Her mind kept drifting back to the archway, to the strange warmth and the pull she had felt. As she worked, the silent mother, Eliza, entered the room. Clara had always respected Eliza's quiet strength, her wisdom. Eliza placed a hand on Clara's shoulder, her touch grounding, and said, "I see you carry a heavy burden, child. You've always been drawn to things you can't explain." Clara looked up, startled, but saw only kindness in Eliza's eyes. "There's more to this world than what you can see," Eliza continued. "Don't be afraid to seek the truth." Clara nodded, uncertain but comforted by Eliza's words. She didn't know where this journey would lead, but for the first time in days, she felt the weight of her uncertainty ease. Clara spent the next few days in a haze, her thoughts tangled with Eliza's cryptic words. She began to wonder if there was more to her life than the estate, more than the monotonous chores and Lord Edward's cruel gaze. Late one afternoon, as she was passing the library, she overheard a conversation between Lord Edward and the cruel patriarch, his father. "Asha's too stubborn," Lord Edward's voice echoed through the door. "She's not like the others. I don't know what she's after, but it's something dangerous." The patriarch's reply was cold and calculating. "If she's a threat, we deal with it before it becomes a problem." The words sent a chill down Clara's spine. She had no idea what they were talking about, but it confirmed one thing. There was something more to her existence, something that the family feared. Clara couldn't shake the feeling of dread that settled over her after hearing the conversation. That night, as she sat in her small room, she opened her window to let in the cool night air. The woods, now familiar yet mysterious, stretched out before her. She felt drawn to them again, the pull stronger than ever. She had to know what lay beyond the archway. Despite the risks, Clara couldn't ignore the feeling that her destiny was tied to the secrets hidden in those woods. She gathered her courage and stepped out into the night, the moonlight casting an ethereal glow over the estate as she made her way toward the forest once again. The walk through the woods felt different this time. The trees seemed to whisper as she moved past them, their branches swaying in an unseen wind. Clara's heart pounded in her chest as she approached the archway again. The symbols on the stones glowed faintly, just as they had before. She placed her hand on the stones once more, and this time there was no hesitation. The warmth surged through her again, and this time she felt it awaken something deep inside her. The power she had sensed before was real, and it was hers to claim. As the symbols pulsed with energy, the ground beneath her feet trembled. Clara's world was about to change, and there was no turning back now. Clara awoke to the sound of birds chirping, the morning sun shining softly through her window. It felt different today. The air was heavier, charged with the same energy she had felt at the archway. She couldn't explain it, but she knew she wasn't the same. As she prepared for the day, she found herself drawn once again to the woods. But this time, it wasn't just curiosity that pulled her forward. It was something deeper, something powerful. She knew there were answers waiting for her there. As Clara approached the archway once again, she felt a surge of energy, a crackle in the air that made the hair on her arms stand up. She hesitated for only a moment before stepping forward. This time there would be no turning back. The truth was out there, and it was time to find it. The moment Clara stepped into the clearing, the familiar archway stood before her, now glowing more brightly than ever. Her heart raced, and she felt the familiar warmth surge through her fingertips as she touched the stones. This time, however, the feeling was different. It was not just warmth. It was power, raw and untamed. The ground beneath her feet trembled, and the symbols on the arch seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. Clara stepped back, the air around her crackling with energy. It was as though the forest itself was alive, responding to her presence. Then she heard a voice, soft and distant, calling her name. She froze. Clara. The voice was familiar, but it wasn't Eliza's. It wasn't anyone she knew. The name was whispered on the wind, as if the trees themselves were speaking to her. Clara felt a sudden pressure in her chest, as if the weight of the forest was bearing down on her. The voice was louder now, more insistent, calling her name again. Clara. It was a command, a plea, and Clara found herself taking a step forward toward the source of the voice. The air grew thick, and the ground trembled beneath her feet. As she approached the center of the clearing, the trees seemed to part, revealing a figure standing at the edge of the forest. The figure was cloaked in shadow, their face hidden, but the presence was undeniable. It was as though the forest itself had given birth to this being. Clara felt a surge of both fear and recognition. She had no idea who or what this figure was, but she knew they held the key to unlocking the power within her. The figure raised a hand, beckoning her forward. Clara took a deep breath and stepped forward, crossing the threshold of the clearing. The figure raised their hand once more, and Clara's heart raced as she reached them. As she came closer, the figure's form became clearer. It was a woman, her face soft yet ageless, with eyes that seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly light. She spoke, her voice like the rustling of leaves in the wind. You are not what you seem, Clara. The power you feel within you is ancient, a part of you that you have long forgotten. Clara's breath caught in her throat. What do you mean? She asked, her voice trembling. You are the heir to a power that has been hidden for centuries, the woman continued. But there are others who seek it. Others who will stop at nothing to control it. You must decide what to do with this power. You must choose your path. The woman's eyes glowed with an intense light, and Clara felt a surge of energy course through her body, leaving her breathless. Clara's mind spun with the revelation. She was the heir to a power she hadn't even known existed. She had no idea what to do with this newfound knowledge, but one thing was clear. Her life was no longer hers to control. The woman's words echoed in her mind. You must decide what to do with this power. The thought of it terrified Clara, but a part of her felt the weight of destiny pressing on her chest. As she looked around, she realized the forest had changed. The trees seemed alive with energy, and the once quiet clearing was now filled with an almost palpable sense of purpose. The figure before her remained silent, waiting for Clara to speak. Clara took a deep breath and finally spoke, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. What do I need to do? The woman's eyes glowed brighter as she answered, You must unlock the power within you. Only then will you understand what you are meant to do. Clara felt the weight of the decision pressing on her as she left the clearing. The woman's words still echoed in her mind. Unlock the power within you. But Clara had no idea where to begin. Her thoughts were tangled. When she returned to the estate, she found Lord Edward waiting for her, his smirk as sharp as ever. I hear you've been taking walks, Clara. What secrets are you hiding? His tone was mocking. Clara didn't flinch. She had more important things to worry about. Something dark was looming, and she could feel it tightening around her. She knew she wasn't just the heir to power. She was a threat to them all. That night, Clara sat by the fire, her mind racing. Eliza's voice echoed in her thoughts. Don't be afraid to seek the truth. Clara knew she couldn't hide any longer. There were forces in motion, dark forces that sought to control her. She had to understand her power, harness it, and use it against those who sought to break her. But first, she needed answers. The woman in the woods had spoken of unlocking the power within her, but Clara had no idea how to start. Still, she wasn't ready to give up. She wouldn't let fear control her. The next day, Clara took a chance. She returned to the woods, determined to uncover more. As she approached the archway again, the air crackled with energy, almost as if it had been waiting for her. She stepped forward, placing her hand on the glowing symbols once more. This time there was no hesitation. The moment her hand made contact, the ground trembled and the symbols flared brighter than ever before. Clara's vision blurred as she felt a surge of power rush through her, her body vibrating with newfound strength. The energy surged through her, filling her with an overwhelming sense of purpose. As Clara stood there, a vision flashed before her eyes. The mansion, burning, a storm raging around it. She saw herself standing at the center, powerful and unyielding, but surrounded by enemies. She saw Lord Edward's cruel face, sneering as the flames devoured everything. Clara gasped and stumbled back, the vision fading as quickly as it had come. The power within her was real, but it was also dangerous. She wasn't just the heir. She was the key to something far bigger, something that could change everything. Clara couldn't ignore the vision. She knew the storm was coming, and she would be at the center of it. The power she had unlocked was both a blessing and a curse. But she wasn't going to back down. She would fight, no matter the cost. As she made her way back to the estate, she saw Lord Edward waiting for her once again. His expression was colder this time, more calculated. "I know what you're up to, Clara," he said, his voice low, "and I won't let you destroy everything I've worked for." Clara stood tall, meeting his gaze with fierce determination. "You don't control me anymore," she replied, her voice steady. The battle for control had begun. The tension between Clara and Lord Edward grew with each passing day. Clara knew she couldn't keep hiding. The power she had unlocked in the forest was more than just a gift. It was a weapon. She had learned to harness it, but now she needed to understand how to control it. As night fell, she retreated to the woods once again, drawn by the undeniable call of the archway. But this time, she wasn't alone. From the shadows, a figure emerged. The silent mother, Eliza. "You're seeking something dangerous, Clara," Eliza warned, her voice soft but filled with concern. "The power you're awakening isn't something you can easily control." Clara turned to face her, the weight of the woman's words settling in. "I have no choice," Clara replied. "I won't let them win." Eliza's words lingered in Clara's mind as she walked deeper into the woods. She had always trusted the older woman's wisdom, but this was different. The world was shifting around her, and there was no going back. The archway stood before her, more imposing than ever, its symbols glowing with an unearthly light. Clara placed her hand on the stones once more, but this time, the surge of power was overwhelming. It wasn't just energy. It was a force, a living presence that seemed to reach into her very soul. The ground shook beneath her feet, and the trees around her creaked as if they were waking from a long slumber. Clara felt herself pulled into the center of the power, her body trembling as the energy coursed through her, overwhelming and uncontrollable. Suddenly, Clara's vision blurred, and she was thrown into a chaotic whirlwind of images. She saw flashes of the future, the mansion in flames, Lord Edward standing over her, his face twisted with rage. She saw herself, powerful yet alone, surrounded by enemies. The vision was so vivid, it felt like she was living it. But it was also clear that the future wasn't set in stone. She could change it. She could stop it. The power within her was a key, and she had to decide how to wield it. But even as the vision faded, Clara felt the presence of something darker, something watching her. She turned around, heart racing, only to find herself alone in the clearing once more. Clara stumbled back, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She knew now that the power was not just hers. It was something ancient, something that had been waiting for her to awaken. But the more she embraced it, the more she felt the darkness within. The forest around her seemed to pulse with life, as if the very earth was responding to the energy she had unlocked. Clara took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had to control it, or it would consume her. She turned toward the mansion, knowing that the time had come to face Lord Edward and the patriarch. The final confrontation was inevitable, and Clara was ready. The night was thick with anticipation as Clara made her way back to the mansion. The weight of her power hung heavy on her shoulders, and she knew the final battle was near. As she entered the courtyard, she saw Lord Edward standing at the top of the stairs, his arms crossed. "I knew you'd come," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you can stop me, Clara? You're nothing but a tool, a pawn in a game you don't understand." Clara's heart raced, but her voice was steady. "No, Edward," she replied, her words filled with conviction. "I'm not a pawn, and I will stop you." The standoff between Clara and Lord Edward felt like an eternity. Tension hung thick in the air as Clara stood at the bottom of the grand staircase, staring up at Edward. The power that coursed through her body was almost unbearable, but she held it in check. The world seemed to narrow to just the two of them, and she knew there was no turning back. "You think you can stand against me?" Edward sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "You're nothing without me." Clara's eyes blazed with defiance. "I'm everything without you," she replied, her voice steady and filled with resolve. In that moment, she felt the full weight of her destiny. This was more than just a battle of wills. It was the final test of her strength and the true beginning of her journey. Clara's body pulsed with energy as she stood there, facing Edward's mocking gaze. For a moment, she felt a flicker of doubt, but it was quickly extinguished. She had seen the truth, and she could no longer deny her power. He stepped forward, her feet sure, her heart steady. Edward's smirk faltered, a brief flash of unease crossing his face as Clara approached. He had underestimated her, just as everyone had before. But this time, it was different. Clara was no longer a pawn. She was the force that would change everything. With a single, powerful motion, she reached for the power within, unleashing it. The ground beneath her feet cracked, and the air around her hummed with the intensity of her power. As Clara summoned the energy within her, the ground beneath them trembled, and the atmosphere became charged with raw power. Edward took a step back, his arrogance quickly fading into caution. "What are you doing?" he demanded, his voice tight with fear. But Clara didn't answer. Instead, she let the power flow through her, feeling the ancient force surge within her veins. She could see the path ahead now. The storm was coming, and only one would survive. The energy around her intensified, swirling in a whirlwind of light and shadows. For a moment, Clara saw everything clearly. The mansion, Edward, the patriarch, and the entire estate. All were part of the same twisted system. And she was the one who would bring it all crashing down. Edward stumbled backward, his eyes wide with panic. "You can't control this," he shouted. But Clara could see the fear in his eyes. He had always thought he was in control, but now the tables had turned. With a forceful motion, Clara directed the energy toward him, sending a wave of power that knocked him to the ground. He gasped for air, his expression one of disbelief. Clara stood over him, her power fully awakened, her presence overwhelming. "You have underestimated me for the last time," she said, her voice cold and full of finality. The mansion, once a symbol of power, now felt like a prison, and Clara was the one who held the key to its destruction. Clara stood over Lord Edward, her heart still racing with the surge of power. The battle wasn't over, but it was clear that things would never be the same. The mansion, once a symbol of Edward's control, now felt like a crumbling monument. As Clara turned to walk away, Eliza's words returned to her. "You must decide what to do with this power." Clara knew that her journey wasn't over. There were still questions to be answered, and the final reckoning was yet to come. But as she left the courtyard, she felt something shift inside her. She was no longer afraid. She had become the power she had once feared, and now she was in control. The days following Clara's confrontation with Lord Edward were a whirlwind of change. The mansion, once a place of oppression, now felt empty and hollow. As Clara walked through the estate, she could feel the weight of what she had accomplished. The patriarch was still a looming threat, but the balance of power had shifted. She had taken the first step toward reclaiming her destiny, but the journey wasn't over. She knew that the hardest battles were still ahead. The truth of her lineage, the power she now held, all of it was just the beginning. The estate, with all its dark secrets, had been her prison. But now it was just another obstacle in her path to freedom. Clara's thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on her door. It was Eliza who had quietly entered the room, her face filled with both concern and pride. "You've come a long way, child," Eliza said gently. "But there's still much more to be done." Clara nodded, her eyes meeting Eliza's with a mixture of gratitude and determination. "I know," she replied. "I still have to face him. The patriarch." Eliza sighed, her eyes darkening. "He won't go down easily, but you have the strength to end this." Clara felt a surge of resolve. The patriarch was the final piece of the puzzle, and she wouldn't stop until she had freed herself and the estate from his grasp. The night before her final confrontation, Clara stood alone in the courtyard, staring up at the stars. She could feel the presence of the patriarch, even from within the mansion's walls. He was watching, waiting for the inevitable clash. But Clara no longer feared him. She was no longer the scared servant, the girl with no power. She had become the force of change, and nothing could stop her. As the wind whispered through the trees, Clara whispered to herself, "Tomorrow it ends." The patriarch's reign would end, and she would be the one to bring it to its knees. The morning came too quickly, and Clara stood in front of the patriarch's office, ready for the final showdown. The doors to the office swung open, and the patriarch, tall and imposing, stood before her. His cold gaze was fixed on her, but this time Clara didn't flinch. "You've come to face your destiny," the patriarch sneered, "but you will never win. I control everything." Clara took a deep breath, the power inside her rising to meet his challenge. "Not anymore," she said, her voice steady. "I control my own fate now." With that, she stepped forward, ready to face him, ready to end the cycle of control and fear that had bound her for so long. The battle was fierce, but in the end, Clara's power proved to be the deciding factor. The patriarch, for all his control, couldn't match the raw strength of the force she had awakened within herself. When the final blow was struck, the mansion seemed to tremble, as if it too were relieved of its centuries-long burden. Clara stood in the midst of the ruins, her chest heaving, her body drained, but her heart lighter than it had ever been. The mansion, once a symbol of oppression, was now a broken relic of the past. Clara had won. She had freed herself from the chains that had bound her, and she was no longer a servant to anyone. The future was hers to shape.